So the Democratic Alliance is among a number of parties that raised concerns about certain provisions in what's popularly called the BELA Act. The president has deferred implementation for 3 months for further discussions on contentious clauses. Now, meanwhile, the South African Democratic Teachers Union is calling for the Basic Education Minister, Siviwe Kwagube, to be given an ultimatum to either implement the BELA Act or face the chop. This comes after she boycotted the signing ceremony of the bill on Friday. But for more on this, we are joined by Dr. Anthea Cereseto, who is the CEO of the governing body foundation. Dr. Cereseto, a good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. So the BELA bill or act now set to be implemented. That's excluding clause 4 and 5 of it. We did see you were in attendance on Friday. Talk to us about where we are right now for the governing body foundation. If you think that we're moving in the right direction, particularly with the president saying we'll hold off on implementing clause 4 and 5.
Right. Good morning. Thank you. The Governing Body Foundation is a politically non-aligned organization, and our members cover all the schools in South Africa, all types of schools. So obviously, when we make any decisions or we fight any arguments, we make sure that they are based on sound principles, such as what is in the best interest of children and what is in the best interest of all learners. And so we believed that the legislation was sufficiently acceptable. So we went off to the union buildings to witness the signing of the act. The president took us by surprise when he suspended 2 of the contentious clauses. Now, we do understand why. Those were 2 clauses that have been in contestation since the very beginning because they are perceived to be undermining the rights of school governing bodies to do what's in the best interest of their school in their particular community. We were happy, or we were satisfied to sign the act because we believed that in the act there were sufficient provisions, administrative provisions, processes that had to be followed if an HOD wanted to exercise that authority that the act gave him. It is premised on the fact that officials are required to act in good faith. And I think that's where the problem was, with certain organizations feeling that there wouldn't be good faith on the part of some people, not all, of course. So we signed, and well, we didn't sign, we witnessed the signing. And I think the president is quite wise, in the spirit of the GNU, to go back and let's talk a bit more, because I was witness to the rushing through of the bill passing in the National Assembly. There were still some areas that had not been sufficiently aired. A report wasn't allowed to be discussed at the very last moment. And some parties, not only the party objecting at the moment, other parties too wanted some final words. So I think it was a strategic move. However, it does put us in a bit of legal uncertainty as far as what happens now with those 2 bits of the act, because it will have to go back to Parliament and have to go back through a process. So we will implement, and you know, the minister has said if the act is passed, she will implement it. I've witnessed videos of her saying that she will implement if it is passed, because that's her job, and she knows it's her job. So, you know, that's what we as an organization believe. It's an act, it must be implemented. Not easy. There's still some quite difficult things that have to be worked out, especially grade R. There are details there. I mean, you can't implement it next year, and parents are going to say, my child is 6. And the act says if my child is 6, I have to have that child in school. Otherwise, I could be arrested. There are some problematic areas like that. And provinces who are in charge of implementation are going to have to speak to the people in their province about how they're going to implement the difficult parts that require a bit of processing and getting ready for the full implementation. So I was surprised that the President actually didn't also suspend the implementation of grade R to a date where it might be feasible.
Yeah, well,
even if that were 2026.
Yeah, well, I mean, you've already got the Western Cape Education Department saying that from a budgetary point of view, implementing the clause around grade R is going to be particularly difficult, even when the provinces already talked about losing 2,400 jobs. But if you allow me, Dr. Cereseto, let's focus on clause 4 and 5. In fact, I want to start with 5 because this is where your organization really would, I suppose, have quite the loud voice here, right? The clause 5 of the Act now compelling the SGBs to submit their school's language policy. What is the submission that the governing body's foundation then makes in the next 3 months so that there is a resolution and that in the next 3 months, as the president says, the matter is wrapped up and we can move forward with the implementation of the full Act and not just some parts of it?
Well, actually, we haven't seen the exact wording of Section 5. The very last version of the bill that we have that was tabled in the National Assembly is B2D 2022. And that took away the compulsory submission of that particular policy. Governing bodies have to draw up their policy in terms of what is specified in the Act. And most of those clauses deal with making sure that constitutional rights are protected, no discrimination. And that's pretty obvious. And that has been the case since the Constitutional Court judgments on these matters. Because when we had a New Schools Act, we had no case law. And then there were challenges because certain political officials or education officials, much the same thing in most places, wanted schools to force admission. And that had to go all the way to the Constitutional Court to get some kind of understanding. And that understanding was that somebody's got to have the last say. But the school still had the right to determine their policies, but their policies had to comply with South African law. And only when those school policies were challenged because a child applied or parent applied and the child was not admitted, then that section of the school's policy would then be suspended until the HOD and, if necessary, the MEC had made a determination and exercised their authority.
Yep.
So we have been operating in that regime for quite a while, but it has meant that some schools have had to go to court when the provincial authorities actually exceeded their authority and forced something that actually wasn't necessary.
You know, I don't have a lot of time left, Dr. Cereseto, but there's obviously the question of politics getting in the way of implementing and you know bringing basic education and high quality basic education to the masses. I mean, clause 4, for instance, talks about the education department having greater control over the admissions policy, and that now being something that that's hanging over the next 3 months. Are you concerned around the political tug of war that sits really at the base and at the heart of this BELA bill discussion? I mean, at the moment, we're even running a poll and we're asking if Siviwe Gwagube, for instance, is the person to implement the bill. When you see that she did snub the signing on a Friday, right? And there it is on your screens for our viewers to see. But what is your view on the political contention around this, what some argue is an incredibly important bill for transformation and also access to education in our country?
Yes. You know, it's nothing new. Politics have always played a big role in education, and I gave a speech a very long time ago about the problem that if we could take politics out of education, we'd all be quite a lot better off, because everybody's trying to claim ground. We have a particularly important piece of legislation, our supreme law, and it is up to everybody, whether it is school implementers or the education department implementers, to observe those important things. And the basic is non-discrimination on all grounds. The problem comes with capacity in schools. And where the problem has been is where there's been pressure to admit children to already full schools, what is deemed full, and that undermines the quality of schools. Now, I'm well aware of many schools, and I'm in Gauteng, where there's been a pressure because we have limited spaces in classrooms. Pressure has been put on schools to admit more learners, and it's got beyond the capacity of the school to handle those learners. And there's a point at which quality education can't be delivered. Everyone's seeking quality. And where there is a pressure to admit more learners, it's usually the schools that are high-performing schools. But if that, if a head of department pushes more children into a school, it can potentially also undermine the quality of education. So there's a fine balance there of what is acceptable capacity, and hasn't been determined properly yet. And we've been asking with other associations, can we please have a proper way of determining what is school capacity?
Yeah.
And it's really problematic in schools where they have some big classrooms and some small classrooms. And to say you've got to have so many per classroom, but actually they can't fit. So that's what schools have argued. And if only everybody kept a cool head and was fair to all and didn't expect the impossible, I think we could manage this. In Gauteng, with the online admissions, some of these problematic things have already been removed because it's almost admission by computer. In other places where there has been discrimination, it's got to stop. And the department officials have always had the power to go and investigate and find out what's going on there. And if people have acted incorrectly in terms of our constitution, which doesn't permit discrimination, they could have acted. So I do believe we've got sufficient things in place at the moment to protect people.
All right, Dr. Anthea Cereseto, we really do appreciate your time. Thank you so much for speaking to us. Dr. Anthea Cereseto is the CEO of the Governing Body Foundation.